Finding Clarity, a guide to the deeper levels of your being, based on the teachings of Jeru Kabbal, collected and edited by Leonard Zunin, Robert Strock, and Victoria Ricci, published by North Atlantic Books, Berkeley, California. Chapter 1: The Story of Your Life. I would like to tell you a story. It is the story of your life, the story of everyone's life. After you were conceived, you lived for 9 months in the womb, though you weren't aware that 9 months were passing. As far as you were concerned, you had always been there. Always, since your very beginning, forever and ever, you had been there. It was eternity for you. It was paradise. If in natural circumstances everything you could possibly want or need was provided before you actually needed it, you never had to feel that something was missing. Everything was exactly as it should have been. And then one day it was time for you to be born. Within a matter of minutes, everything changed for you. You were thrown out of paradise into what we call life. There was no warning. No one prepared you for this major change. It was a huge shock. After spending an eternity in darkness, suddenly bright light was everywhere. After spending an eternity where the temperature was always exactly right, suddenly it was extremely cold. After spending an eternity where all sounds were soft, muffled, and familiar, suddenly every sound seemed unnaturally loud and harsh, unpleasant and threatening. After spending an eternity surrounded and supported on all sides by something soft and warm, suddenly nothing was there. You were free floating in wide open space. You were being wrapped in a sheet or cloth, which the adults around you thought was very soft, but it felt like sandpaper to you. As if all this shock were not enough, if your umbilical cord was cut too soon, you began to suffocate. You felt as if you were going to die. To save your own life, you had to start breathing on your own. But this first breath was not a pleasant breath. The air felt harsh and hot. You went from paradise to shock in just a few minutes. You moved from comfort, security, safety, and perfection, from the paradise of the womb to the experience of almost dying. The first thing you consciously did was to try to save your life. You were in a state of pure panic. When you're in danger, you have a natural tendency to pull your energy in. Look at most babies who have just been born. They are still clenching their hands. Their eyes are tightly shut. We think it's natural, but the baby is saying, "I have to defend myself in order to save my life. I'm afraid to let go." When you were born, in a state of panic, the only thing you could do to protect yourself was to contract. Not only your physical body contracted, but something at a very deep level contracted as well, and it hasn't relaxed since. All babies, even those born in more natural ways, realize something very quickly. I can't do anything for myself. I depend on others. I'm in trouble now. But you had the instinct to survive. You also had the intelligence to know that you were helpless. When you were in the womb, your mother took care of you, but after you were born, you felt that you were in danger and your own defense mechanisms began to function. Your first thoughts were based on fear. I'm weak. I'm helpless. I'm in danger. I'm defenseless. I'm vulnerable. I'm inadequate. I can't take care of myself. I'm somehow separate from everything else. I won't survive unless someone or something takes care of me. Although you aren't thinking these exact words, nevertheless, the feeling was there. The original programming. It is extremely important for you to grasp that your first self-image, your first ideas about yourself, came at these early moments in life. And these ideas were, I'm weak, I'm helpless, I won't survive unless someone takes care of me. This is the first programming that went into your mental computer, and after all this time, it's still there. None of the programming that came after this is new. It's an extension, another layer of the original program. At your core, you still feel about yourself the way you felt then. I'm weak, helpless, defenseless, vulnerable, inadequate, and I can't take care of myself. I need someone else to guarantee my survival. Although it may be difficult to accept this, nevertheless, it's important to see that it formed the beginning of your ego. It was the beginning of your defense system. It was the beginning of your mind. It's just as fresh now as it was the day you were born, though it's been covered up and disguised. Following this idea for a bit, let's see how this original program led to the creation of other programs. Picture yourself as a baby. You're totally helpless. You're also extremely intelligent and vulnerable, and you know you can't do anything for yourself. After a few days, you notice that someone is there for you regularly. You don't yet know that this person is your mother, or perhaps a grandmother or sister, but this nice lady comes in, picks you up, feeds you, changes your diapers, and makes you feel safe and content. Very soon you realize that your survival depends on this nice lady. The nice lady is the survival itself. The nice lady is Mrs. God. And because you have tremendous intelligence, you're very sensitive to her moods, her attitudes, her tension. You feel her fear. This makes you tense. Because if Mrs. God is tense, what is the state of the world? Sooner or later, this nice lady begins letting you know that some things you do please her, while some other things displease her. Soon she starts expecting things from you, and you begin to do these things very naturally. As you learn to do more and more things, you use your new abilities to please her, to keep her happy, and yes, to manipulate her. Perhaps one of the first things a baby learns is to use crying as a tool. If it works, if mother comes when baby cries, then baby cries more and more to get mother to come. If mother doesn't come, then baby drops that tool and is silent. If a big fuss is made about your learning to walk, you try to walk sooner. You use all your intelligence and all your abilities to guarantee your survival. You learn at a very early age to manipulate others and yourself for one reason only, to assure your survival. To do this, you create survival strategies, behavior patterns to help you get your needs met and to feel better. But even when you can walk and talk and do many other things, Down deep, this same program continues to run, which says, I'm weak, I'm helpless, I'm defenseless, vulnerable, inadequate, and I won't survive unless someone takes care of me. The strategies you work out are based on your original feelings of helplessness. They are not arising moment to moment in your present life. The strategies are formed because of this first feeling you had. I can't take care of myself. Therefore, I have to impress other people. It's important what other people think of me. If they don't like me, they're probably not going to take care of me. The original feel remains, along with the original tension. You begin manipulating your life to make it secure and to guarantee your safety. You begin to realize that some things worked better than others. Some things got you the kind of attention you wanted, and others got you the safety and security you wanted. Other things had the opposite effect. They made your mother or parents angry and therefore created uncertainty in your life. So you learned at a very early age to begin choosing the strategies that worked for you and to disregard those that didn't. Your development by age 4. This process went on until you were about 4 years old, when you had already been through every major experience for the first time. What it's like to be loved, what it's like to be rejected, what it's like to be hungry, what it's like to be lost, what it's like to be alone. You had already learned how to react to strangers and how to react when someone gave you something or took something away. You had already learned to be an introvert or an extrovert. You had already learned to be aggressive or to be passive. You had already learned these things by the time you were 4. All the strategies you had learned by this age became constellated as part of your defense system, your way of keeping yourself alive. And of course, you felt that everything depended on other people taking care of you. Later, this became very important for you in your relationships with other people, because you thought that if you did the right thing, they would continue to take care of you. At the base of all our strategies is the child's worry and anxiety that it can't take care of itself. All its manipulations, all its attitudes, all its strategies are based on overcoming this primary fear. Picture yourself as a 4-year-old. You have attitudes, impressions, and programs running that you have had since birth. Other programs have been there since you were 2 months old, 6 months old, a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, and so forth. However, the longer the programs have existed, the more fixed they have become. The oldest and most fixed program is still the one that says, I'm weak and helpless, I'm defenseless, I'm vulnerable, I'm cut off from existence, and I can't survive unless someone takes care of me. By the time you were 4, your basic personality structure, your basic attitude towards yourself, toward other people, and toward the world had already been formed. Since then, basically nothing has changed, except that you have perfected your strategies. You have learned to cover up certain attitudes which you know others don't like, and you have learned to use certain attitudes and strategies to your advantage. All your programs were running then, but in a cleaner, purer, and more open form. If you really want to understand yourself today, go back to that 4-year-old you used to be. From now on, when we speak of the 4-year-old, We're speaking of the sum total of all your strategies, attitudes, programs, and conditioning, all that you had acquired by the time you were 4. That 4-year-old is stored in the part of your mind that is not conscious. It is stored in the subconscious, which amazingly is about 99% of the mind. Considering its size, it is therefore much stronger than the conscious part of your mind. That means that the 4-year-old is much bigger and stronger than you, the conscious adult self. It also means that your childish attitudes are by far more powerful than your adult attitudes. This is very important because the subconscious cannot tell the difference between the past and the here and now, between what is memory and what is reality. The difference between memory and reality. Memory is not reality, though it seems real enough to the subconscious, to the 4-year-old. Rather, it is an artificial reality, in the same way that a movie is. You know that if you go to a movie theater and look at the screen closely, it's simply a flat surface with light flickering on it. There are no people on the screen, and what you see is not real. You may sit in the audience and cry genuine tears, but it doesn't mean that something real is happening on the screen. You are actually watching and then reacting to an illusion. I don't mean to imply that memory is useless. As a matter of fact, we would be lost without memory, which we use in practical ways that serve us. We speak English through the process of memory. We drive a car through the process of memory. But memory needs to be put in context. From very early on, if you have an experience, you internally and unconsciously record it. It's like taking a picture. Some pictures are traumatic or fearful, others are happy, and still others are bland and less interesting. But everything gets duly recorded. As you go through life, recording everything that happens to you, you create quite a collection of impressions, almost like your own museum with thousands, maybe millions of photographs. These photographs are put together like home videos in your mind with different scenes running all the time. It's like a cinema complex that has 10 different films playing with a simultaneous selection of tragedies, comedies, and love stories. The same thing goes on in your head, only with a lot more screens. If someone says, "I don't like the way you did that," the movie number 28 comes up. If someone says, "Your hair looks nice," then movie number 45 comes up. These movies are running constantly, and your subconscious believes in them. It is familiar with these movies because it has been watching them for as long as they have been there. They actually feel more real than life does. The subconscious is experiencing and re-experiencing these old movies all the time. We all project these old movies onto our present life and think we are experiencing reality. But in fact, we are mostly experiencing the old movies again and again. Your subconscious, your 4-year-old self, can't tell the difference between these old inner movies and your real life in the present moment. When something happens to you in the present, immediately an old movie starts playing in your head, one that resembles something occurring in your life today. If it happens to be a movie about something unpleasant, your 4-year-old thinks that the old unpleasant thing is happening again today and fears that he won't survive. He reacts with panic, so you... I once did some regression work with a man I'll call John. John had terrible relationships with women. When he was about 4, he was playing in the backyard while his mother leaned over the fence talking to the neighbor. He heard her say, "Well, we didn't really want little Johnny." That's all it took. Little Johnny heard that and ran off, overwhelmed with pain. Of course, his mother undoubtedly went on to say, "But you know, when he came along, we were very happy about it." But little Johnny only heard, "I'm not wanted." And because the event was so painful, he stored the memory deep in his subconscious, though he repressed the memory and forgot all about it. But from that moment on, deep down, he felt totally lost and alone in the world, unloved and not at home. Of course, his mother told him that she loved him many times, but he felt that he couldn't trust her and that she never really wanted him. When John became an adult, this feeling of being abandoned and alone was harming his relationships with women. It was only a memory, and probably a flawed one, yet his 4-year-old self would relieve the terrible feelings every time it saw that movie. For this man, it remained his reality, and the past was thus always alive in the here and now. Actually, the past is still alive for most of us. The illusion of the past. There is no such thing as the past. Your 4-year-old is afraid of something that doesn't actually exist anymore. She's afraid of those memories, believing that the memories are reality. She thinks that the movie is real. If a dragon appears on the movie screen, she thinks it's a real dragon. You have to point out to her that it's not a real dragon. It's just light shining on a screen. It's just an illusion. When you were a child, you repressed certain painful memories because you didn't want to feel them again, but now you can see that those memories are part of the past and hence no longer relevant. Your past is now as relevant to you as my past is relevant to you, which means completely irrelevant. Neither my past nor your past can affect you, not unless you erroneously believe that it can, not unless you allow it to. It is very important for you to understand that there is no such thing as the past. There is only now, along with a collection of memories which are like old photographs in an album. Although you can view. In the same way, you don't have to be afraid of your memories. Your 4-year-old is afraid of some of them because she doesn't want to once again feel the fear attached to them. But don't think you can just humor your 4-year-old who thinks there is actually a dragon, because then she will be panic-stricken and take over. Rather, you must convince your 4-year-old that it's safe to look at these old photographs, telling her that the dragons of memory are simply harmless illusions that cannot hurt her anymore. We cannot change as long as we believe our old movies are real. We need to liberate ourselves from them. To begin with, we have to recognize that they simply are movies, not real life. And then we have to exit the movie theater and convince the subconscious, the 4-year-old, that the movie is no longer relevant. Though this process sounds easy, it can be very difficult. It requires constant attention and practice. Learning how to be present enough to see that the movie is just an illusion can be a major challenge. However, once you are able to free yourself from stagnant memories, you become liberated. That is the secret. But as long as you believe subconsciously that your memories are real, they can make your present life miserable. There is no such thing as a new desire. You can also make your life miserable with long-cherished wishes or desires that never seem to come true for you. Every desire that you have today is the outgrowth of a previous unfulfilled desire from the past. If you traced it back far enough, you'd trace it back to birth. As an example, let's assume that you said, "I want to go downtown tonight." That's a desire. But we could ask, "Why do you want to go downtown tonight?" And you would say, "I want to go to the opening of the new nightclub." So you really didn't want to go downtown. You want to go to the opening of the new nightclub. If the club had been at the beach, you would have wanted to go to the beach. Wanting to go to the opening of the new club is a desire, behind which must lie another desire. So we could ask why you want to go to the opening. You say, "Because I want to meet my friends there." That's another desire, isn't it? So we could ask, what desire is behind this one? Why do you want to meet your friends there? You say, "Because I want to be part of the in crowd." Wanting to be part of the in crowd is another desire. So we ask why you want to be part of the in crowd. Your reply is, "I want to be popular." Why do you want to be popular? "So I'll have lots of friends." Why do you want to have lots of friends? "So I'll never be alone." Why don't you want ever to be alone? "So there will always be someone to take care of me." And why do you want someone to take care of you? "Because I feel I can't take care of myself and that all by myself I cannot survive." This is not oversimplified. It is the truth. The reason that you wanted to go downtown tonight has its source in early childhood. What you truly wanted was to be around lots of friends so that there would always be someone to take care of you, because deep down you are still feeling weak and helpless. You can go through this process with every desire and discover its beginning in infancy. There is no such thing as a new desire. It's simply a new expression of an old one. You're still trying to get something that you didn't manage to get when you were an infant. For example, if you have a desire to be popular, you also have the desire to dress stylishly, and you want your hair to look nice, and so on. You have other desires that branch out of this one desire to be popular. Each of these desires branches out and proliferates, leading to several other desires, so it gets to be like a tree. You start with one desire, which branches out into 2 and then 4 and then 8 desires, and they in turn branch out into many more desires. But they can all be traced back to one source, one trunk. Desires are also like fruit on a tree. The fruit doesn't just appear from nowhere. It's connected to a small twig, to a small branch, to a bigger branch, and then to the trunk. All your desires come from the original desire, which was to have someone take care of you so that you would survive. That is all your subconscious has ever really worried about, but now that you are an adult, it has taken on many forms and has many expressions. The fear of not surviving. Let's leave desire for a moment and consider fear. It's easy to see how every fear is basically a fear of not surviving. Are you afraid of suffocating? Are you afraid of drowning? These are just different ways of expressing the fear of not surviving. You may think you have fears that aren't related to surviving, but if you examine them closely, you'll find, in fact, that all of them are. One of the most common fears is being afraid of what other people think about you. That fear began in childhood when you were worried about what your mother thought about you. If she didn't like you or was somehow not at ease with you, she might leave you and your survival would be in danger. So in that old context, you're still worried about what other people think of you. To put it plainly, all fears can be traced back to the fear of not surviving, and all desires can be traced back to the desire to survive. Let's consider fears and desires in a different way. A desire is just a fear expressed in a positive way, and a fear is just a desire expressed in a negative way. The desire, I want to be rich, is just a different way of saying, I'm afraid of being poor. I want to be well informed is exactly the same as I'm afraid of not knowing what's going on. I want to control my environment is the same as I'm afraid that my environment is going to control me. Any fear you have can be expressed as a desire, and any desire that you have can be expressed as a fear. They aren't even two sides of the same coin. Rather, they're exactly the same thing expressed in two different ways. Several practices help you to become more aware of your desires. One of these, the trapdoor game, which we will explore in Chapter 5, allows you to see that all your present desires have their source in the past, and that this past is just a bundle of memories. It's no longer actually happening now, and you see that you no longer need to be influenced by it. I have much more to say, but this is the essence of the story I wanted to tell. The story of your life. The story of everyone's life. It's a story of fears, of the subconscious programmed by a 4-year-old, of memories and desires, but it's a story with a happy ending. At least the story can have a happy ending because it's up to you to write it. In this book, I'll talk about how you can simply observe the fear of your 4-year-old without letting him or her take control, how you can stay centered and present and point yourself in the direction you would like to take. I will help open you to change and to discover yourself as you truly are. Chapter 2. The nature of the subconscious. How can the story of your life be so dominated by your 4-year-old? How can the 4-year-old in your mind be so powerful? Why can't we simply decide to think or behave a certain way and that will be that? Why do we spend so much time watching the old movies in our heads, so much time confusing the present with the past, so much time trying to fulfill desires that in reality come from the infant we used to be? All the answers can be found in the subconscious. It's amazing how little we know about this part of ourselves. Even though it is so large and so important, strangely enough, it's basically unknown to us. The metaphor of the iceberg. One of the easiest ways to understand the subconscious is to think of an iceberg. An iceberg floats with 9/10 of itself beneath the surface of the water, while only 1/10 shows above the water. If we compare this to the mind, we could say that the 9/10 of the mind below the surface is the subconscious, and the part above the surface is the conscious mind. In reality, this proportion is not precisely correct, but it will work for our purposes. To understand just how powerful the subconscious is, let's suppose that our iceberg is somewhere in the North Atlantic. The part that is below the water is considering floating up to the North Pole for a vacation. At the same time, the part that is above the water is thinking of floating down to Sicily for a vacation there. Where do you think the iceberg will actually go for its vacation? Obviously, it's going to go where the bigger part, the unknown part, the unseen part, wants to go. That's where the power lies. It doesn't matter if the part that's above the water has packed a bikini. It doesn't matter that it has suntan lotion and a beach umbrella. It doesn't matter if it has a tourist guidebook to Sicily. None of that makes any difference whatsoever to the part below the water whose destination is the North Pole. The power of the subconscious. In your own life, you have experienced many instances when your subconscious disagreed with your conscious mind. For example, many times you've made resolutions to get up early in the morning to do something you've been postponing, to pay your bills, do the laundry, write a letter. You set the alarm clock to wake up early, but not only do you not get up when the alarm goes off, you sleep longer than usual and end up being late for school or work. You can't quite figure out why this has happened because the evening before you were so determined to get up early and do that chore. Your resolution didn't work because your subconscious didn't want to get up. It didn't want to do the homework or the laundry or write the letter. Therefore, it arranged for you not to do these things. The opposite also happens when your subconscious mind happens to be in agreement with what you, operating as the conscious mind, want to achieve. For example, perhaps some of your friends are going water skiing. They invite you along saying, "If you really want to come, be standing outside your door ready to go at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. We are not going to honk the horn, so if you want to go, just be outside your door at 5. You set your alarm for 4:30, so you'll have a little extra time to get ready. And you actually wake up a few minutes before the alarm goes off, feeling rested and refreshed. You get ready very quickly and easily, and at 5 o'clock you're standing outside your door. Your friends pick you up, and you have a beautiful day water skiing. Why did you wake up early, feeling so good and so alive? Because your subconscious wanted to go water skiing, so it made everything happen very easily and effortlessly, almost like magic. Things like this happen all the time. That's because there are times when your subconscious agrees with you and other times when it disagrees. When it disagrees with you, life is hell. You make a resolution to do something and feel determined to do it, yet somehow it just doesn't happen. In contrast, when your subconscious agrees with you, you decide to do something, and it happens so smoothly and harmoniously that you're hardly aware of it. The more you are in harmony with your subconscious, the more satisfied you are with yourself and with life. However, the more these two parts of you are in disharmony and conflict, the more dissatisfied you are going to be. The goal is to help you bring these two parts into harmony. There are 5 things to consider when looking at the relationship between these two parts of the mind. Let's look at them now. Who is I? The first thing to remember when looking at the relationship between the subconscious and conscious mind is that we identify with the conscious mind, even though the subconscious is by far the bigger part of our mind. It's one of those paradoxes of life that when you speak of I, of myself, you are Returning to the metaphor of the iceberg, which would be more correct to say? That the part of the iceberg above the water has a part beneath the surface? Or that the lower part, which is bigger by far, has a part that sticks up into the air? Or we could ask if the tail, which is the smallest part of a dog, has a dog, or if the dog has a tail. Or might it even be more correct to say that both the tail and the dog are the dog? A different kind of intelligence. The second thing to remember when looking at the relationship between the subconscious and conscious mind is that the subconscious is intelligent, although it is a different kind of intelligence than you might think. This means that your subconscious is at the same time your best friend and your worst enemy. When it's in agreement with your conscious mind, it's like true love. Everything happens almost without effort. Take, for example, driving a car. When you first learned to drive, your conscious mind was very actively involved. But once you had learned to drive, the subconscious took over, and you could drive all the way across a big city, sometimes without being conscious of having driven at all. You can be preoccupied with other things while you drive, arriving at your destination without remembering driving through intersections, stopping at red lights, starting again when the lights turn green, avoiding pedestrians, starting, stopping, turning. All this was done for you by your subconscious because both of you agreed where you wanted to go. Consider the hundreds of little things your subconscious does for you every day. Think of brushing your teeth. There was a time when you had to do it consciously, but after a while, your subconscious could do it without the conscious mind being involved. The same thing happened as you learned to write. In the beginning, the conscious mind was involved, but now you need only to think about what you want to say, and the subconscious forms the letters for you. It's the same with reading, which also just happens by itself. Life is filled with these acts of cooperation with your subconscious. But even so, a big part of you is always in disagreement. As long as the subconscious and conscious minds don't agree with each other, there can be no satisfaction because whatever you do, one of the two parts will be unhappy. You cannot win because one side or the other will always be a loser. The subconscious always wins. The third thing to remember, as mentioned above, is that when the subconscious and the conscious mind disagree with each other, the subconscious will always win in the long run. The conscious mind may seem to be dominating the subconscious, but it only appears this way. This is what we call willpower, which is another way of saying that the conscious mind tries to force the subconscious to do something it doesn't want to do. Willpower can work for a while, but not for very long. The subconscious will always win the struggle because it's stronger. For instance, it may win indirectly by setting up psychosomatic problems. Let's suppose that you tell yourself, I have a nice job, it pays well. I have an efficient secretary and a corner office. My wife is impressed. Her mother is even more impressed, and the neighbors are impressed. Everything sounds fine, but maybe deep down your subconscious mind is saying, I don't like the job, and I hate my boss. Whenever I have a good idea, he makes fun of me. I know that my colleagues are lying to me, although they pretend they like me. It is a crummy job anyway. And on and on. You have a split. At one level, you think it's a good job. On another, you think it's crummy. You stay because of your conscious feeling that it's a good job. But after a while, you develop a problem. Perhaps it's ulcers. Your doctor urges you to make some changes, especially to your working conditions. In other words, get a new job. So you get a different job in an effort to save your life. What has happened? You've left the job the subconscious didn't like. the subconscious has gotten what it wanted. This process may take months or even years, but in the long run, the subconscious will win and you will make a change. The worrying subconscious. Next, you must understand that the subconscious is a professional worrier. That's its job. It worries about the well-being of the entire organism, what you call yourself. After all, it's the job of the subconscious to keep you alive. Your subconscious is on your side. The final thing to remember about the relationship between the subconscious and conscious mind is that the subconscious is actually never against you, although you may think that it is. However, it is simply operating from programs that are not in harmony with the present reality. The only motivation of the subconscious mind is to protect the whole organism. 4 ways to see the subconscious. If this is your first time looking at this whole business of the subconscious, I've probably frightened you by convincing you that you are in the grip of some kind of a monster. In some ways, this is true, for the fact is that most of us have never explored the function, content, and motivation of your own subconscious minds. If that's the case, wouldn't you like to know what motivates this iceberg that is carrying you through life? What causes the iceberg to want to move east instead of west, north, or south? The metaphor of the library. To understand the motivation of the subconscious, let's make a few comparisons. Think of a library. Not just an ordinary library, but one with many basements going deep into the earth. Every experience we have gets recorded, filed away, and shelved like a book in this library. Some are filed away so deeply that the librarian doesn't even know they exist. Of course, the memories, the books that are frequently requested, are kept fairly close to the librarian, which means that she's conscious of them. They are, by definition, the conscious mind. There is something else that's very interesting about this library. There are some books, some memories that we have chosen not to remember at all. But we can't destroy them. That's impossible. So we take these memories we don't like, those that are sad or threatening or unpleasant, and lock them in a trunk, placing them in the deepest sub-basement of the library. Then we lock the door and think we've thrown away the key. This is called repressed material. It's still there and still very much a part of who we are, but we don't want to acknowledge that it's there. That's how our library operates. The metaphor of the computer. We can also compare the subconscious to a computer. A computer not only stores things, like a library, by recording them, but it also follows programmed instructions. In this respect, a computer is a lot like the subconscious. What we would call programming in a computer is comparable to learning for the subconscious. It can be learning a movement, an attitude, or a language. Learning is the act of teaching the subconscious something, and once it knows it, often the conscious mind no longer has to be involved. The metaphor of the watchdog. We might also find it helpful to compare the subconscious to a watchdog. Suppose that you move to a new community and there aren't many lights on the streets, no police cars patrolling the area, and you are a little bit afraid of burglars. To protect yourself, you get a watchdog and teach him to bark when someone comes too close and to bite when someone comes even closer. You teach him to do the normal things a watchdog should do, and you are very satisfied with his performance. However, after a number of years, your community becomes more populated. Now there are lights along the streets, there are police cars patrolling the area, and the danger of burglars is practically zero. One day you realize that something is not quite right. You're inviting friends over, but they never drop in. You look into the matter and realize that your faithful watchdog is frightening people away because he doesn't know the difference between a friend and a thief. Whenever friends or potential friends get too close to your gate, your watchdog starts barking and maybe even biting. So then you try to re-educate your watchdog, saying, "Look, I know I told you that you're supposed to bark when someone gets too close and to bite if they get even closer, but now I'm changing the instructions. When someone comes, just wag your tail. You're not my guard dog anymore. Now you are my public relations dog. You're supposed to look friendly, open, receptive, and graceful. Lick their hands, pretend that you're happy they've come." Your dog nods and says, "Okay, I understand, but I'm not sure I agree." Now you have to keep an eye on him, explaining over and over what you want him to do, and even that doesn't guarantee that it will happen the way you want it to. You've trained him to be a watchdog, and it's not easy to teach an old dog new tricks. But that's exactly what you have to do. You have to keep training him and perpetually watching him. You have to become the watchdog now, reminding him of the new rules until he finally learns them. This will be difficult because he still thinks he knows more about who's a thief than you do. It's going to take a long time to move him from mistrust to trust. Can you blame the dog? He's only doing what you insisted he do. It's not his fault that he can't change tactics immediately. Nor is it his fault that he's done something you're unhappy about, because he's only doing what you taught him to do. It's the very same way with the subconscious. What we call reprogramming is like trying to teach an old dog new tricks and to stop him from performing the tricks you taught him before. Remember, the dog is not being bad. The dog is being loyal, doing what he thinks is best for you. He thinks he's protecting you in a very necessary way. The only problem is that his programming is out of date. The metaphor of the automatic pilot. Another way to see the subconscious is to think of it as the automatic pilot function in an airplane. One day you realize that every time you take the plane, you land in Chicago. This has been happening for a long time, for all your life perhaps, but you didn't think much of it. You thought that Chicago was the only place in the world. Now you realize that maybe you should go someplace else instead, so you decide to go to Las Vegas. You use willpower and think of all the reasons why you should go there, but when the plane lands and you go down the steps, you are not in Las Vegas. You are in Chicago. The next time you become more determined. You use even more willpower and even do some positive affirmations. You are so sure of yourself that this time you have decided you are going to Rio de Janeiro. You have gotten yourself a nice new costume for the carnival, and you have learned to do the cha-cha and the mambo. The plane lands, and you start cha-chaing down the steps, convinced that you are in Rio de Janeiro. Once again, you find yourself in Chicago. There's nothing wrong with your airplane. Nothing wrong with you, and nothing wrong with the automatic pilot. The problem is that your automatic pilot simply needs to be changed. It is doing what it was told to do, which was to take your plane to Chicago. In that respect, it is functioning perfectly. Sitting in the back of the plane, wishing you could go somewhere else, using all your willpower, is not going to change the automatic pilot. You have to actually get to the automatic pilot and learn to set it for Las Vegas or Rio or wherever else you want to go. You may even learn to turn it off totally and fly by the seat of your pants. Though you may be miserable and very sick of Chicago, it is not the fault of your subconscious that you are landing there. It is simply doing what you taught it to do. If you want to go someplace other than Chicago, you have to work with the subconscious. Find out exactly why it wants to go to Chicago and then make it clear that going there isn't necessary anymore. Wishful thinking won't do it. Changing the automatic pilot requires your conscious effort as well as your intelligence. Getting in touch with your subconscious. All this may sound discouraging, but we need to learn that the subconscious can be reprogrammed to be in accordance with reality. But to do this, we first have to clearly see and understand the program that's running. We have to know what's in the subconscious before we can change or influence it. If you know what's in your subconscious mind, it is not difficult to change it if you dedicate yourself and have access to the right techniques and strategies. The only way to know what's in the subconscious is to have contact with it. Obviously, you already have some contact, but you will have to develop more. The more you know about the programs in your subconscious, the more you'll truly understand yourself, and the more you can begin, step by step, to bring those outdated programs up to date, while at the same time dropping some of the programs you no longer want. The subconscious may be trying to communicate with us, but we don't listen. Dreams are an attempt of the subconscious to talk with us, but it takes a lot of time and energy to sort out the significant material from the garbage. There are other ways to get in touch with the subconscious and find out what's there. Hypnosis, guided fantasies, or simply observing your actions, paying close attention to what you do, what you avoid, and what you move toward. Most meditation techniques can help you identify what's in your subconscious by simply watching the thoughts that arise. The longer you do this, the more you'll see coming to the surface. You do have the opportunity to become conscious and to learn to use your subconscious in a positive way so that your life is no longer on automatic pilot. The first step is recognizing that the subconscious exists and then accepting that it is a powerful influence on your life. Then you can learn how to contact your subconscious and relate to it without causing it terror. I will show you techniques for working with your subconscious and give you ways to reassure it that everything is okay. Mainly, I would like for you to begin to understand and feel the relationship between you and your subconscious, realizing that you are often motivated by forces that are unknown to you. Though they are part of you, you nevertheless remain unaware of them. They cause you to do things you actually don't want to do, to move in directions you don't want to go in, and to avoid things you really want to do. It's important to see that at the present time, you're basically split. First, accept the fact that your subconscious is a powerful influence on your life. Then learn how to deal with it so that you can turn it from your worst enemy into your best friend. The more you can be in harmony with your subconscious, the more you'll feel in harmony with all of existence. Questions and answers. Question: if you are having trouble making a decision, Does it mean you are having a conflict with your subconscious? Answer. Your need to make a decision reflects the fact that your subconscious and conscious mind are not in harmony. Otherwise, you would have already made the decision. You are making decisions constantly, but often you don't spend time deliberating, you just do it. This is because your subconscious and conscious are in harmony in those cases. The moment you say, I have to make a decision about that, it means that one part of you wants to do this and another part wants to do that. Otherwise, there would be no problem. Question. How do you reprogram the subconscious? Answer. Ultimately, you want to stop identifying with your mind, especially the subconscious part of it. You need to see that what you call I is not this computer that you are carrying around. You are something beyond that. Practically speaking, it is easier to start off with reprogramming the computer, like changing habits. Then it becomes possible to deprogram, to drop the habit completely. Once you have learned to do that, it becomes easier to disassociate from it. It is almost impossible to disassociate while you are right in the middle of it. A lot of people try to do the impossible. Then they get discouraged when it doesn't work. It's better to start doing things that you can do and to take small steps. But at the same time, you want to be aware of the direction in which you want to move. Question. What's the first step in reprogramming? Answer. The first thing to do is not even to worry about reprogramming. Instead, find out what is in your subconscious. Find out what patterns are there and how they are directing you. Consciously, you think you know yourself pretty well, but when you go into your subconscious and begin asking questions, you are going to be very surprised to find out that it's a totally different animal down there. Question. Does the subconscious like the idea of disassociating? Answer. Anything that looks like it could possibly change the subconscious can be threatening to it, since it is permeated with fear. Because of this, it's important to learn to work with your subconscious in a way that doesn't constellate even more fear. This means that everything you do should be done in a way that reassures it instead of making it more frightened. It is true that the idea of disassociating can be frightening. Therefore, we don't start there. Rather, we start by finding out what the subconscious is actually afraid of, and then we go from there. Question. I was thinking of the example of a man leaving his job. Is the subconscious directing the conscious mind to like the job and at the same time creating reasons for him to leave? It seems like there are two sides of the subconscious and they are in conflict. Answer. You are right. The original motivation for liking the job, that he has a nice salary or maybe that he impresses his mother-in-law, is coming from the subconscious. But it is also at some point coming from the conscious mind. You see, when you become aware of it, it is by definition part of the conscious mind. Chapter 3. The 4-year-old. Remember how the story of your life began? You were created in a paradise, the paradise of the womb. And after an eternity in this paradise, you were born. Suddenly, you were faced with certain unpleasant facts. You had the instinct to live, but you had no way to help yourself to do so. You wanted to survive, but had no survival equipment. You learned that you were dependent on other people. Someone took care of you, and you realized that she or he was synonymous with your survival. These caregivers weren't just people to you, they were survival itself. You became fascinated with them, probably more fascinated with your mother and father than with anyone else. It became very important to you that your mother paid attention to you, that she gave you her energy and time. To ensure that she continued liking you and taking care of you, you began fitting in with her moods, her likes, and her dislikes. You did the same with the rest of your caregivers. As you became able to do more, you used your abilities to guarantee your survival by influencing these people to keep taking care of you. The older you got and the more things you could do, the more you used these abilities to guarantee your survival. You did so by modifying your behavior to fit into your family's situation. Although you did these things to ensure your survival, you didn't actually feel that your safety was assured. In reality, however, your safety was practically guaranteed, for very few parents leave their babies unprotected. But that fact didn't comfort you when you were an infant because you didn't understand it. Even infants and young children with very protective parents face difficult situations. For example, one of the greatest traumas for a young child is to be taken to a hospital. It's a terrible experience. Not understanding what's happening, the child feels cast out of her home and may lose trust for the rest of her life. The hospital staff may make things worse by saying to the parents, "It's best that you don't come in, otherwise she'll get excited and cry when you go away." The child doesn't understand that her parents are doing this for her own good and that the nurses are doing what they believe is best. Children in this situation simply feel abandoned and fear that their parents don't really love them. They consequently feel that they can't rely on their parents. Not only won't they protect them, but they will deliberately put them in very painful, confusing, and threatening situations. Even if a mother loved her child as much as any mother possibly could, her child might still not feel safe. This is because children are so helpless and dependent that any little thing can be disturbing, even terrifying. You've probably seen this happen. A mother takes her 2 or 3-year-old son on a shopping trip and the child wanders 3 steps away. Suddenly, he realizes he can't see his mom, and all at once he feels lost and panic-stricken. His survival is threatened, and his whole guarantee of survival is gone. But mom was just 5 feet away, watching all the time. A child can only view a situation from a very limited perspective. Mother can't make me safe. Your mother obviously took care of you, or you wouldn't be reading this today. But there were many, many moments, maybe even months or years, when you didn't believe she would. If this is difficult to comprehend, imagine that you had no legs or arms and that you couldn't speak or understand the language everyone else was speaking around you. Every once in a while, someone would come along and give you food. Obviously, you're going to become fascinated by this person. You'll hang on to his or her every word, even if you don't understand them. You'll listen for your savior's footsteps, and when this person goes away, you really want to know whether or not he or she will return. Actually, you would prefer to have this person remain right there in the room with you all the time. When you were an infant, the situation was similar but even worse because you didn't understand what was happening. As an adult, even if you have no arms or legs, no ability to communicate or understand what is being said, at least you have some experience to guide you. As a newborn, you had none. You went through a series of situations, sometimes feeling very loved and safe, and sometimes feeling terrified and fearful of dying. All these situations are recorded in your subconscious. You tried different strategies for surviving and feeling safe, smiling, crying, behaving and not behaving, and all these are recorded in your subconscious as well. After a while, you had a collection of strategies that worked for you. You knew that strategy A was helpful, but that strategy B was not. That strategy C was good, but strategy D was not. All your strategies put together became what we call your personality, although in reality they are your defense system. As we discussed in chapter 1, your defense system, your personality, was formed by the time you were 4 years old. It happened by this age because by then you had already experienced virtually all the major things you were going to experience. You had already learned what to do when someone loves you, when someone rejects you, when you are sad, when you are alone, when you are being punished. All your major attitudes and strategies had been formed, and underlying them was the newborn's fear that it couldn't take care of itself. Your basic personality is set by the age of 4, and after that it doesn't change. If you are basically shy when you are 4, then you are basically shy when you are 24 or 34 or any other age. If you are basically aggressive when you are 4, then you are basically aggressive when you are 34. If you are basically an introvert when you are 4, then you are basically an introvert when you are 34. One purpose of finding clarity is becoming aware of dysfunctional patterns. That requires strengthening adult awareness and putting energy into that awareness. As you grow older and go through school and have other experiences, you learn to cover up certain parts of your personality when you realize that the world doesn't like them. At the same time, you learn to make the best use of certain other parts of it. You learn to put your best foot forward and gradually move into areas where you no longer notice the rough edges of your personality. If you are shy, you start choosing other shy people for friends. You choose a profession that involves only interaction with people like you who don't really notice that you are shy. You choose friends the same way. You and your friends just think that other people are too aggressive. The worry lamp. If you want to understand why you do certain things, it can be very helpful to go back to when you were 4, when you were 3, when you were 1, and remember the kind of person you were then. If you can do that, you'll be able to see your personality in a truer, undisguised form, remembering that you were this way or that because of your particular situation. We will discuss ways to do this in chapter 13, Practices. When you go back, one of the things you'll see is that your worry lamp is still burning. You think that you have problems with survival today, but you really don't. You did have them when you were born because you were helpless, and those memories are still in your subconscious. As a result, you have a deeply buried idea that tells you, I have a problem, I'm in danger. This worry light is as old as you are. When it started burning, it was the truth, for you were in danger. But the light is still burning, and certainly you're no longer in danger. Even when someone tells you that you're not in danger, you can't believe it because that light is still on, shining on those old memories. You see danger as well as problems in the here and now, even when there are none. Your fears and problems are not coming from the outside, they come from within. No matter what is happening externally, you are still lighting up your inner fear. Even if you solve your so-called problems, other problems inevitably arise because your worry light is always on. Therefore, your goal is to get to the root of the problem so we can turn the lamp off. You do that by getting acquainted with your 4-year-old, then by showing and convincing him or her that right now there is nothing to fear. A new way to live with your 4-year-old. Now that you are beginning to become acquainted with your 4-year-old, who basically directs your life, the next step is how to learn to live with him or her in a new way. It's literally as if you have taken a new child into your home. Let's suppose that you adopt an orphan, a child whose background you know nothing about. But you notice, of course, that she has certain patterns, habits, fears, and desires, although you may not know where they come from. Let's also suppose that she has been abused or hurt, and that something has caused her to contract in some way. You may say to the child, "It's okay now. You don't have to be afraid of such and such. You are staying with me now." The child will hear what you are saying, but may not be able to let it in. If this child has been in a place where it is not okay to go to the fridge, and you recognize that she would like to, but is afraid, you might say, "It's okay to go to the fridge if you want to." But she may not be able to do it immediately because of her past conditioning. You learn to be very patient with this child as you learn to see the world through her eyes. You don't try to push her around or dominate her. Rather, you try to go into her inner core and understand her, and then to re-educate her from that place. If you push this child too much, she will contract even more. In the same way, you learn to be understanding with your inner 4-year-old. Do what you can to open the doors so that he or she will want to come out. Don't pound on the door saying, come out, I want you to be free." That won't work. A lot of people begin talking to their 4-year-old the way their parents talked to them. At first they speak lovingly and gently, and if that doesn't work, then a bit condescendingly, and when that doesn't work, firmly, until finally, when that doesn't work, angrily. However, that is not the way to do it. It didn't work with you then, and it won't work for your 4-year-old now. The thing to do is always to listen. You learn to allow your 4-year-old to express itself. He or she is simply dreaming. That doesn't mean you should say, "Shut up, you are just dreaming." Instead, you say, "Tell me what you think is happening." Then listen to what your 4-year-old tells you all the way to the end. When you do this, you will see for yourself that what he or she believes to be happening is not actually taking place in reality, because it is only a memory. It's a projection. Green dragons and listening. Here is a real-life example of the way your 4-year-old thinks and why it's so important to listen to everything he or she says. Let's suppose that you have a young flesh and blood son. In the middle of the night, he runs into your bedroom, frightened and crying, and says, "There's a dragon under my bed." You believe that he has had a nightmare, but if you say to your son, "You just had a bad dream, there are no such things as dragons, go back to bed," he is not going to be able to go back to sleep. He'll be in panic all night long. You want to help this child drop the idea that there is a dragon under the bed. So you might say, "A dragon? That is really something. What color is it? Oh, a green one. How big is it?" And you keep talking about it and you keep listening, and you say, "Okay, just stay here and I'm going to go look at it. I haven't seen a green dragon in a long time." You go into his bedroom to investigate and say, "Oh yes, a green dragon. But I know how to get rid of him. I'll just say these 4 words and then look, he's gone. And you let the child look and the dragon is gone. Maybe you will find some other way to do this, but certainly you don't say, "Come on, silly, there are no such things as dragons, especially green ones." Rather, you let the child know that you are willing to listen and accept what he says. At the same time, while you are listening to the child talk about the dragon, you yourself don't start believing in the dragon, otherwise you can be of no help. This is a very important point. Inquiry. You want to listen to help it all come out when you talk with your 4-year-old. The more you listen, the easier it is for you to see that it is all a dream, a phantom reality. When you ask, "How are you feeling?" he might answer, "I'm angry at so-and-so." You might think that this is the end of it, but keep listening and by all means keep asking questions. "So you're angry at so-and-so. What are you angry about? How does that make you feel?" The next level of inquiry contains the most important questions, such as, what does that remind you of? Does that remind you of something from when you were younger? And how are you feeling then? You ask these questions because if your anger is being caused by a memory, you probably won't realize what caused it until you go into that memory. You may think your girlfriend is making you angry by doing something in the here and now, but actually she is not. Your anger is coming from a memory. As you listen, stay focused on the here and now, in touch with the moment. You will recognize that what the 4-year-old is telling you is not actually happening in the present. It is simply a memory. The first big step is always to see what is present reality and what is only an old memory. The 4-year-old represents past conditioning, and his view is based on that. You are no longer that 4-year-old. You are the adult that you are today, in the here and now, with all your capabilities, all your strengths, and all your abilities to take care of yourself. Realize that although in this moment your survival is not in danger, the 4-year-old almost always thinks that danger lies just around the corner and that he or she may not survive. You're already divided. You can be practically certain that the adult you are now is not in any kind of danger. It is very rare for adults to be in mortal danger, but the 4-year-old is always going to feel that way as long as he or she is disconnected from the adult self. If you start with these 2 givens, you realize that, as a matter of fact, you have been divided most of your life. You have this child inside you that feels weak, helpless, vulnerable, dependent, and unable to survive unless someone takes care of him or her. But at the same time, you are an adult now with a physical body that is strong and capable, and you are well able to take care of yourself. You are also able to interact with other people. It is as though there are 2 totally different entities within you, and yet up until now they have been all mixed up together. One moment you may feel like an infant, the next moment you feel like a 3-year-old, the next moment a 10-year-old, and the next moment you feel like your actual age. It goes up and down, alternating between one age and another. Just admit that you have 2 different personas. Once you do, you can use that awareness in a very positive way. Begin by separating these 2 aspects of yourself: the core personality, which is your 4-year-old formed by its past experiences, and who you are here and now. Then, keeping those 2 as separate as you possibly can, be present in the here and now as the adult you truly are. The goal is to re-educate this child by communicating to him or her. Regardless of what you have learned in the past, regardless of what you have been through, regardless of what fears you have experienced and what desires you have created, regardless of what strategies you practiced to stay alive, I want you to know that you live with me now. You are totally safe. Someone is with you 24 hours a day. I can take care of you better than anyone else in the world. I am big and strong. I can earn a living and I can take care of us. You can't pull the armor off. In seeing reality and understanding the superfluity of your patterns, you have to discover why your 4-year-old, your personality, believes that this particular defense mechanism is important and effective, and help it see that those old dangers no longer exist. In that light, give him or her permission to let go of these defense mechanisms. You can't, however, just say, I command you, drop your armor. Instead, you can take a more gentle approach, saying, oh, that is a nice suit of armor you have on. Where did you get that? You have been carrying it a long time, haven't you? What are you wearing it for? Oh, so it protects you from dragons, from green dragons. Have you seen any lately? You keep talking about the need for the armor while comparing it to the reality of now. Is that armor still needed? What do you think the chances are of seeing another green dragon? Keep talking until the 4-year-old becomes aware that the armor is actually heavy and superfluous besides. It doesn't mean that it wasn't needed originally. It just isn't needed now. Expose and compare. Our work consists of bringing things from the subconscious to the surface so that we can really see them. We then compare those things to the here and now so that we finally can see that our memories are false, that only the here and now is real. This is the way to see reality more clearly. Don't be afraid to let these things come up. As a matter of fact, we can encourage them to arise while comparing them always to the here and now. Although many people do regression work, they don't compare what comes up from the past to the here and now. This means they live in their nightmare thinking it is real. They think that they are working on themselves, but to the contrary, they are just torturing themselves by creating more nightmares. Many therapies do this by working with the dream instead of with reality. They enforce your belief that your problems are real, which only serves to keep them alive. And although other disciplines or approaches try to bring you into the here and now, they don't deal with the subconscious level, so they don't work either. The green dragon keeps breaking through. However, if you bring the stuff up from the subconscious, expose it to the sunlight, and compare it to the here and now, then it will dissolve. And when it does, it will leave space for something else to arise. This, then, is the process, repeating one thing after another, letting old stuff come up, exposing it to the here and now, and letting it dissolve. Pretty soon you start getting lighter and lighter because you are not carrying around these old fears. The lighter you become, the easier it is to actually be in the moment. You become more relaxed, your energy flows more, and your aliveness actually expands. You are more natural, more present, and more alive. The more you clean up the past and then let it go, the more you will be in the present. Drop your defenses. When you hear teachers say, drop the past, drop the mind, or be in the here and now, what they are saying is to drop those old programs, those memories of past fears that are no longer relevant. When they teach you to be aware, it means to be aware that what you consider problems are really old memories or programs coming from your subconscious. When you hear, there's nothing to do, It means that this moment is perfect as it is. It's only your projection of old memories that make it imperfect. When you hear, "You're already Buddha, but you don't know it," it means that in reality you are an integral part of existence, even though old memories make you feel separate. Although exploring your past can help you tremendously to see reality, as long as you stay fascinated by the past, you can't be in the here and now. But it is important to see what this implies. If you drop your old programs of fear, you also drop your strategies. If you drop your strategies, you also drop your old personality. Remember, however, that what you identify yourself with is nothing more than a collection of your defense mechanisms. The I you speak of when you refer to yourself is a bundle of these defenses, all formed into the shape you know as your personality. And as you may know, the word personality comes from the Greek word meaning mask. So personality is the thing that you hide behind, that defends you and helps you survive. The more of these defense mechanisms you have, the more miserable you're going to be. That may sound like a paradox. The bigger your army, the worse off you'll be. But that's the way it is. You expect the world to fit into the pattern of your defense mechanisms, but existence doesn't care at all about your defense strategies or about your ideas about what the weather should be. Existence just goes ahead and makes the weather. The more ideas you have about how the weather should be and how to protect yourself from the weather, the more miserable you will be. The more you can drop your ideas and simply accept the weather as it is, the more content you will be. Most of our learning comes through repetition. We repeat, repeat, and repeat until we can do something. Whether we are learning to type or to drive a car, or as children to brush our teeth, to write, or to tie our shoes, it is repetition that solidifies the learning process. The unlearning process is the same way. To unlearn these old habits requires a lot of repetition, so you need to be patient with your 4-year-old. Understand that it is going to take going over the same things again and again. It's the way you tell the child who comes to live with you, "It's okay for you to go to the fridge. You don't have to be afraid." Or, "It's okay for you to do this. I am not going to punish you." You have to repeat this endlessly. So give yourself the time and patience for that. Understand that it is necessary. Be respectful. Always be respectful of and grateful to your 4-year-old. First ask her, "Are you willing to talk with me right now?" Don't just assume that you can barge in asking your questions. To the contrary, being respectful will win you a lot more cooperation. Once the child realizes that you are not going to push her around and that you can become friends, you will get results. Act from a place of understanding and by all means respect the child that you used to be. You don't allow your 4-year-old to continue directing your life. However, at the same time, you do have to respect the defense system that is your personality, because it is simply too big to push around. If it says, "I am afraid of brass buttons," you say, "How interesting. Will you tell me more about it? How big are the brass buttons that you are afraid of? When did you first become afraid of them?" Be willing to explore the topic instead of just saying, "That's stupid." As you can see, attitude is very important in this work. Let the relationship be a friendship. You have to deal with the programs in your subconscious, remembering that at the time you installed them there, they made perfectly good sense. However, now that you are no longer helpless and dependent, they make no sense whatsoever. They may even be detrimental to you. That is what you have to decide once they come to the surface. Allow this relationship with your 4-year-old to be a friendship. It will begin as a relationship with a frightened child who has created armor and strategies, a child who has certain attitudes about life, a child who was born totally helpless. These memories are all in the subconscious. That cannot be helped. Your aim now is to help your 4-year-old see that these old ideas are no longer relevant. When you are able to do this, you will transform your view of life from that of a helpless infant to that of a strong and capable adult. Once you have done that, miracles are possible. Questions and answers. Question. I asked my 4-year-old a question and was taken back to a time when I was 12, not 4. Answer. It is possible that something crystallized when you were 12, but whatever happened at that age was based on the 4-year-old that you were. Question. Will my 4-year-old be eager to talk to me? Answer. Some 4-year-olds will be delighted that you have finally opened the door and invited them out of the dark. Others will be afraid to come out. This doesn't mean that they like the dark, only that they have gotten used to it. Somehow, the light is more frightening to them than the dark. Don't be surprised if your 4-year-old is reluctant to talk to you. It might help you understand this to think of a ship. Up in the control room, your 4-year-old is pushing buttons, pulling levers, and turning knobs, going in the direction that was set when you were born. He's worked out all these little strategies to keep the ship going. For him, it's a matter of life and death. Now you, the adult you, ask him to change his course and to change his methods. But change is both stressful and threatening. Question. What if my 4-year-old doesn't want to talk? Answer. Act as if you've just opened your door and found a strange 4-year-old kid standing there. You have to somehow win this child's confidence. You have to be patient, loving, and understanding with her. Sometimes you have to treat your 4-year-old just as you would a stray dog that's been mistreated. Although you don't know what happened to the dog, nevertheless you can see something is wrong. He sees you coming and puts his tail between his legs and runs away, even though you haven't done anything to him. You can't get angry with the dog and say, "Why are you afraid of me? I haven't done anything to you." If you want to win this dog over, you have to get on his wavelength. You have to put out some food way over at the edge of your yard, then go inside the house, close the door, and wait. The dog will eat some food when he realizes that you won't come out and bother him. You do this for a few days. Then one time you put the food out, but stand in the door and wait for him to come. If he comes to eat, you just stand there in the door several more times. After a while, you move a little closer and a little closer and a little closer. You can't demand that the dog trust you right away. Winning his trust is a gradual process. Question. Isn't it true that the 4-year-old has a much clearer view about where to go in life? Answer. No, not at all. The 4-year-old is always coming from the past by definition. She is your past. Your 4-year-old, your subconscious, can sometimes be right, but only in the sense that a clock that has stopped is right twice a day. Question. Can the 4-year-old be aware of the here and now and grow? Answer. As long as the 4-year-old is in command, it will choose the easy ways and you will never come face to face with your basic programs. Question. What happens if you and your 4-year-old disagree? Answer. The 4-year-old will always win if there is a difference of opinion. You may suppress her for a while, but sooner or later she's going to make her presence known. That is, you're going to get sick, have an accident, something is going to happen that will make you listen to the 4-year-old and let her have her way. Not only will suppressing the 4-year-old not work, but it is also unhealthy. It's better to go along with the 4-year-old. If you're afraid, then allow yourself to be totally afraid, because then there's a chance the 4-year-old will express herself. Once the pressure has been relieved, she'll be more apt to say, "Well, now that I've said it, things aren't that bad. I'm not as black as I thought." Question: can't you tell him to shut up sometimes? Answer: remember, your 4-year-old is bigger and stronger than you are. You may tell him to shut up and he'll shut up, but the next minute you may break your leg. The things to do is to establish a good relationship with your 4-year-old, one based on trust. Sit down and have a real talk, making it clear that you are in this thing together. Tell her that you are beginning to understand why she feels the way she does, that you can be a team, that things are different now, that you are not dependent on others for survival like you used to be. Establishing a trusting relationship is the first step. Question: if the goal is to get rid of the 4-year-old, it will be difficult for me to convince it to cooperate. Answer: the goal isn't to get rid of it. Rather, the goal is to re-educate it in the same way that you bring old programs on your computer up to date. The problem is that you have the emotions of a newborn infant and the strategies of a 4-year-old. The idea is to convince your 4-year-old that the danger that existed when you were born is no longer there. We'll explore ways to do that in Chapter 13, Practices. Question: how can I judge in a particular situation whether it is okay to drop my armor, whether it is safe enough to trust? Suppose someone is standing with a knife before me. Is it better to be open? Answer: when you really look at someone, you can see whether he or she wants to hurt you. The best thing you can do is to be open, because most of the time when people want to hurt you, they carry a sign around their neck that says, "I want to hurt you." Question: I don't read that very often. Answer: because you are not open enough to see it, but it can be seen. Animals see it right away. Simply be open and don't project your fear on someone or something else. Question: but I surely have to count on the fact that sometimes there will be people who want to hurt me. Answer: being open is not being stupid. Being open means that you look at reality. If you are taking a walk and suddenly see a dangerous snake before you, you don't stay open, you contract and protect yourself, because that is what the reality requires from you in that situation. But when you are taking a walk and you are not open to reality, then there are two possibilities. You might step on a snake, which may not be a beautiful experience, or you manage to see a snake in everything, in every piece of wood or in every shadow. For the most part, what determines how we handle danger depends on how we handled it as children. However, we have to see that we are adults now. We don't want to repeat those old experiences. For example, we need to understand that a snake fears us more than we fear it. The snake doesn't plan to bite us, nor is it secretly waiting in the bushes along the path, smirking, "Ha, there comes Peter, at last my purpose in life will be fulfilled." It is not that way. You have to use your intelligence, your skills, and your body in dealing with situations that arise in the here and now. That will be a new experience for almost everybody. Usually, you have relied on going back to your old experiences and back into your old movies to handle the snake. Now, simply be in the present and look at everything in a way that is new and fresh. When you meet people, really look at them. What kind of life do they have? Do they really want to hurt you? Or do they have their own worries, their own pains? Maybe they would like a friendly word from you. Maybe they are afraid of you. Start with easy things. Just watch the moment and see what's really there. See that any situation is really okay, which doesn't mean that it will always go exactly the way you want it to. Learn to see alternatives. That's life. That is the way it is with our psychological armor, our psychological defense system. As long as our 4-year-old thinks we need it, we, the adult, continue using it. You don't force the 4-year-old to get rid of protection it believes it needs. Instead, you help it to see that it doesn't need that armor any longer. You might point out that the sun is shining brightly at this moment and that if you do encounter a snake, you can adequately handle the situation if you are present and open to the alternatives at that moment. Then your 4-year-old will be willing to let go of the protection. Listening to your 4-year-old is the most important thing because that enables you to discover why these strategies and attitudes developed in the first place and why he or she felt the armor was necessary. Getting to the core of things in this way will help your 4-year-old to compare these old memories to the reality of the here and now, thus allowing him or her to see that the old memories are not relevant, real, or true. Chapter 4. The nature of memory. Although you may understand what memory is in the usual sense, you need to examine it a little more deeply in order to become friends with your 4-year-old. This understanding will help you recognize what is happening when the movies start playing in your head. To understand memory, you need to realize that you take something like a photograph of everything you experience, thus recording it. This process begins very early, though we don't know exactly how early. With some people it starts in the womb, while with others it seems to commence at birth. Some pictures are of traumatic or fearful experiences, some are joyful experiences, others are of blander and less interesting experiences. Nevertheless, everything gets duly recorded. As you go through life, systematically recording everything that happens to you, you create quite a collection of impressions. Thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of so-called photographs. Some of these pictures will be frightening to look at, and some will not affect you at all. These photographs in your subconscious are put together like home movies, and different scenes from your past are playing all the time. You run some movies more often than others, but, and this is the key thing, your subconscious can't tell the difference between these movies and real life in the present moment. This means that the subconscious is experiencing and re-experiencing these old scenes just as if they were real life. It experiences not just the events, but the feelings and the fears as well. These old movies are constantly running, and the subconscious believes completely in them. They're so familiar to the subconscious that they feel more real than your present life. This means that we are dealing with the same old things again and again, and almost never dealing with life as it occurs in the moment. Understand that memory is not reality. It seems real to the subconscious, but in truth it is an artificial reality, an illusion, just like any movie is. What you are feeling is real, but the cause of it is not. That's the big difference, and that's the secret. If you look at life through the filter of memory, you will always be a captive of your memory. There's no way to get around it. These movies, these memories, are very powerful because the subconscious believes they are real. You have to free yourself from believing in your movies because it's impossible to change as long as you believe they are real. First, you have to recognize them as they begin playing in your head, realizing that they are simply movies that are running, not your present life. Then you can exit the theater and convince your subconscious that this movie is no longer relevant. Reclaiming your life. Most of us have unknowingly given our lives over to our subconscious. We allow it to tell us what we are afraid of, what we like, what we can do, what we can't do, what the world is like, what we are like in the world, and so forth. We have to take back our lives, back from the subconscious. We have to understand that these movies are not relevant anymore because most of them, the really important ones, are movies of our birth and infancy. All these movies about the first years of our lives fill our subconscious, yet the truth is we are not helpless infants anymore. When you are feeling threatened by something, ask yourself, am I feeling this way because of memory or because of reality? If you are feeling threatened because of reality, the feeling is justified. Then, if anything needs to be done, you take appropriate steps. I don't mean to imply that memory is useless. It just needs to be put in context. If you have a calendar hanging on the wall that is turned to the month of May, you realize it's just a piece of paper hanging on the wall that helps you think in a more organized way. But the calendar itself is not May. It's just a piece of paper, a form of memory in a sense. Memory is useful and, as a matter of fact, we would be lost without it. You speak English through the process of memory. There is no need to give that up. You drive a car through the process of memory. No need to give that up either. But we need to put memory into context and realize that it comes from something like a computer filled with old programs. Some of your memories or programs will be useful and helpful, while others do not serve you in a positive way at all. You need to be able to see the difference. We have turned our lives over to the subconscious, which means that we have turned our lives over to this computer. If we want to transform ourselves and truly be free, we have to free ourselves from the computer and begin using the computer instead of allowing the computer to use us. It's that simple. Convincing the subconscious. If you are going to transform, you need to be aware that this picture taking or movie showing process is taking place all the time. You also have to convince your subconscious that when something happens to you and you take a photograph of it, that photograph is not the event. For example, if I have a camera and take a picture of a puppy, the moment I go click, an image is frozen on the film that is not going to change. If this were a Polaroid, I would have the picture almost immediately. I could enclose it in plastic and it would probably last 1,000 years. That picture will always remain fixed. In the meantime, the puppy will be going through all kinds of other processes as it grows into a full-sized dog. Yet here I am with this picture. This picture is not the same thing as the dog. It's a piece of paper. It never was the dog, and it never will be the dog. It is absolutely separate from the puppy that I photographed. This is an important point. Memory is always separate from what actually happens. Regardless of whether the memory is of something pleasant or of something unpleasant, it is like a piece of paper, and therefore it can never harm you. The experience that you photographed was over the moment you went click with the camera. A minute later, the puppy is a different entity. His heart has been beating a certain number of times, he has breathed a certain number of times, his cells have changed, his digestion has moved. all kinds of things have happened. Life continues to flow and move, but memory is always stagnant. It doesn't matter if it looks as real as a movie in a theater. It is still stagnant. It is absolutely dead. Though memory can be useful, it is not something precious or holy. If someone hits you when you were a child and you take a photograph of that, your subconscious can feel that you are being hit all the time. This is because that photograph remains there and the subconscious is looking at it for years afterward. Yet the photograph was never the experience itself of being hit. If you think it is, then you are kidding yourself. The experience of being hit ends at the moment the hitting is over. The wisest thing you could do is to realize that you will never experience this same hit again and that it is now over. Yet the subconscious doesn't do that. Instead, it looks at the photograph again and again, lives in it, thinks what's pictured there is happening all the time, and reacts correspondingly with fear, anger, mistrust, and so on. We need to be aware of that and then help the subconscious see it as well. There is no past or future. Although we talk about the past, about memory as coming from the past, you need to know that there is no past. Memory happens only in the present. The photographs lying in our mind exist now. Our culture has a myth that there is a past. However, you have never experienced anything in the past. You have never taken a breath in the past. You have never taken a step in the past. Everything you have ever done has been done in the present because the present is all there is. It's the same thing with the future. Some folks say the future never comes or tomorrow never comes. That's true because there is no future. It is very important for you to really understand this. The myth that there is a past and future is so deeply ingrained that for most people this is extremely difficult to grasp. But all you have to do is to look at the proof. For example, this book exists in the present. At the time the book was printed, it was also the present. Not this present, but a different present a while ago. When you read it tomorrow, you will also read it in the present, in a present tomorrow. All that exists is the present. When you finally grasp that, you will realize that it's more important to experience life in the present. Otherwise, if you are trying to experience it in the past or future, you are missing what is real. This is a tough idea to understand intellectually and even more so at the subconscious level. Learn to experience and to trust the now. When you realize you can trust the now, you are not so concerned about the so-called past or the so-called future. Letting go of repressed memories. What often happens, especially in childhood, is that we take a picture of something that we can't really handle. This picture is so frightening that we repress the memory, pushing it deeper into the subconscious with the idea that if it's so far down there, then it won't affect us and we won't have to deal with it. Unfortunately, just the opposite is true. If you push something down and repress it, you are simply keeping it alive in cold storage. But though you are not aware of it, it's poisoning you at the subconscious level. Remember the example of Johnny, who heard his mother tell the neighbor, "We didn't really want little Johnny"? He repressed that memory because he couldn't handle it. What can a 4-year-old do when he finds out that his parents don't want him? He can't pack his bags, go down to the airport and fly to Florida. He doesn't know what to do. He can't even go next door. He can only repress it and pretend it didn't happen. And yet, deep down, he knew that it did. We are all carrying around repressed memories. The easiest way to get rid of them is to realize that they are dead and therefore harmless, to allow them to come up since they are just old pictures. But the subconscious is not going to agree to that plan so quickly because it has been repressing these memories for years, and it still believes that looking at them can actually harm you. But if you can convince the subconscious that these things are dead and thus no longer relevant and dangerous, the old repressed memories will begin bubbling up with no effort. The only reason they remain buried down there is that you are using a tremendous amount of energy to put them down. When you stop doing that, however, they are going to start bubbling up. That's the nature of memory. Once this happens, the repressed memories open up to the sun and the air and to your objective perception, and then they disappear because they no longer have any energy behind them. People often talk about memories, saying things like, "Oh, that's a strong one." In truth, all memories are equally dead. Suppose you were looking at one of those big film canisters used in movie theaters, and that one had a comedy in it. Right next to it, you have a canister that has a horror movie in it, and next to that, a canister with a dramatic movie. If you put your hands over each of those canisters, you're not going to feel any difference in energy. If you burned all of them, they would give off the same amount of energy because what they contain is just a dead film. But when light is shown through those films and projected onto the screen, you allow yourself the illusion that these stories are real, and you believe the illusion that people are moving, that someone loves or hates someone, that someone has killed someone. Yet it's all an illusion. The film itself has no energy. Like these movies, your memory itself has no energy. To keep your memories alive, you take the energy from each moment. Your memories have no energy of their own. If you let go of believing in them and feeding on them, they will lose their power over you. Seeing the unreality of your memories is vital. If you think memories are real life, and especially if your subconscious continues to believe that they are real life, you will be in an ongoing struggle. If you can begin to see that what you think is a dragon in your life is in reality just an illusion, then you don't have to fight the dragon. But if you believe in the illusion, you will need to do something about the dragon. Many people get to be pretty good dragon slayers, but it's an endless job. The best approach is to realize that what you think is the dragon in your life is just an illusion. Then you simply let go of it. After that, there's nothing left to do. Your pictures may be inaccurate. Another important thing to understand is that the pictures and movies you have stored away may not even be accurate. Coming from the focus of your subconscious camera, they are photographs of your experience of what happened, of what you think happened, not necessarily of what actually did happen. For example, little Johnny recorded that he was not loved, but he missed the next part of the conversation when his mother said that she fell in love with him as soon as she saw him and has loved him dearly ever since. Johnny was too shocked to hear that, so the photograph that he took at the time, the one that he is spending so much energy repressing, is the one that is interfering with his relationships to this day. And it is not even an accurate representation of what really happened. Once we learn to recognize that memory is different from reality, we then need to help the subconscious see that. There are always two parts to this work. To begin with, we have to understand it consciously and intellectually. The next step is to help the subconscious see the same thing. Some people make a tremendously big mistake in believing that when their conscious mind has an insight, then their whole being has had the same insight. But the subconscious hasn't had it because it's a totally different animal. It can have ideas and opinions that are exactly the opposite of what is in your conscious mind. Having an insight is a very good place to begin, but you still have to go into your computer to do some reprogramming. This may take time and repetition, since the old programming may be deeply embedded. You will have to keep working with your computer until it sees that the old programming is no longer relevant. Only then can it let go of the old and make space for the new. For instance, if right now you check in with yourself for a moment to find out how much you understand and agree with what I've discussed so far, this means that your conscious mind is evaluating what I've said, but it doesn't say anything at all about your subconscious. Who are you? If someone asks, "Who are you?" you may say, "I'll tell you just in a minute after I get out my photo album." You can get the album out, open to the first page and say, "Oh yes, this is me, this is where I was born, this is my name," and so on. Although you can show 100, 1,000 or 1,000,000 pictures of yourself, it does not answer the question of who you are. You are not your photo album, you are not your movie show. But as long as you think you are going to miss the real you. The real you is who you are without the photo album and without the movies. It is the person you are right now, living in this moment. And every moment is different. Your life will be tremendously easier if you have that awareness. Letting go of the past. Letting go of the past and focusing on the present seems so simple, yet it seems to take great courage even to consider it. It's a matter of trusting existence. This is what is so satisfying because it's like coming home. You can let go knowing that you are going to be taken care of. Our hearts begin beating sometime when we are in the womb, and they continue beating until we are finished. We don't usually think about that or about how absolutely vital the heartbeat is to our life, yet the heart goes on pumping day and night regardless of what we are going through. We trust it so completely that we don't even have to think about trusting it, nor does it occur to us to be grateful for it. We don't wake up in the morning saying, "Thank you, heart. You've been very efficient and very diligent and energetic. You've been pumping all night long, and I thank you for that." In the very same way, we take existence for granted. Yet if we can begin to see how much we are taken care of just in the way existence beats our heart, then we start to relax and to feel at home. This can only happen when we are in the now. For most people, living in a memory is like living in a nightmare. This is because the major part of their movie and of their memory is about being helpless, dependent, and inadequate. To be totally dependent, totally inadequate, and totally helpless is not very pleasant, even if we had the most loving parents in the world. So we need to remember several key things. Memory is basically dead. Memory is an artificial kind of reality that has no real energy of its own. Memory is not the same as the original event. It never was, and it never will be. The subconscious, in spite of this, believes that what's portrayed in these movies, in these photographs, is really happening right now. Now that you intellectually understand these ideas, you need to help your subconscious understand them as well. Questions and answers. Question: aren't all emotional experiences valuable? Answer: that's a very important question. Some people consider emotions to be divine. They are convinced that having emotions means that they are not repressing and therefore that they are alive. In reality, emotions are simply outgrowths of thoughts. They are reactions to what you think is happening. Go back to what I said about sitting in the movie theater and crying real tears. You cry even though nothing real is happening. The truth is that the actors are getting paid $16 million to have their eyes water in front of the camera to pretend that they are sad. Your tears are real, but the cause of them is definitely not. When you have an emotion, you go through certain chemical changes. Your heart can beat slower or faster, and so on. Why does this happen? Is it because your subconscious is at the movies, believing something is happening that actually isn't? Or is this coming from the present moment? That's a question you need to ask yourself each time. You will find that most of the time it's coming from memory. Question. You say that we project our memories onto real people? Answer. Exactly. If you didn't trust your mother and hated her, then you probably hate all women and therefore go through the process of hating your mother every day. If a female clerk or some other woman says something to you that you don't like, you hate your mother all over again, even though nothing much really happened. Your feeling is coming from the past, from memory. Question. What about the victims of sexual abuse, for example, incest victims? How does memory apply to them? Answer. If you are working with or talking to someone who has had a memory of incest, it will seem terribly disrespectful to say that the memory of what happened in the past is not the reality of today. But it would be very helpful to show this person that she is reacting to a photograph. She then has a choice to live her life focused on this old photograph, or to realize that the photograph never was the same as the act, that the act of incest itself has disappeared. In the meantime, she is a strong and capable adult with all the wonders and mysteries of existence available to her. She doesn't need to be scarred. Her scars are just memory. It's hard to generalize here because everybody has such a different experience of life. Yet it would help if she opened to the possibility that she could release the tension these memories create from her mind. Again, the trick is in convincing the mind or the subconscious that these memories are harmless and, in fact, dead. Then they will just start bubbling up on their own. Once you get to the point of understanding that only this moment is real and that something that happened when you were 4 or 2 or 1 is not happening now, then life becomes very simple because all you have to deal with is now. My experience is that you will get to the point when you look at these things that used to be so horrendous and say, it's just like the newspaper from last year, it's nothing. The continuous tension that memories create can truly be released. You won't cry or regret. You'll simply see that the memories are irrelevant. It's like it happened to somebody else or in a past life. In fact, all your memories are a past life. Question. So, waking up is about recognizing memories as just memories, not as reality, and about focusing on being in the now. Is that it? Answer. Well, that's what you would want, but I wouldn't say that's it. Nevertheless, it will expand your life about 1,000-fold. It will be more than you can handle at first. For some people, being in the now is almost like having a drug experience. It is so full that they can't even believe it. I've had people tell me, "Oh, I tried that once, being in the now, and it was boring." This statement means that they weren't really in the now. Being in the now doesn't mean that you give up memory or burn all your photographs. It just means that you are no longer affected by them. You can use them and you can make your judgments based on memories, but your photographs no longer fill you with fear and apprehension. They no longer limit you in any way. Chapter 5. The Nature of Desire. The Buddhists say that most of our energy goes into either moving toward pleasure or moving away from pain. These two movements may seem different, but they are actually very connected. The movement toward pleasure, which we call desire, is seen in a favorable light, particularly in Western culture. But if you look more closely, you will be surprised to see that being full of desires simultaneously means being full of fear. The question then becomes whether there is in reality any pain to move away from, and whether you will truly find pleasure once you obtain what you have pursued. Or are you simply running in a vicious circle? Though the subject of desires was already discussed in chapter 1, it is so important that I'd like to revisit it here. Behind every desire lies another. Remember that one of the most basic facts about desire is that every desire is attached to an earlier one, which at root is actually the same desire. To put it in a slightly different way, every desire is a product of a previously unfulfilled desire. No desire is independent, unattached, or unrelated. You never see a leaf simply living in the air without being attached to a tree. Each leaf is attached to a small twig, each twig is attached to a small branch, each small branch is attached to a bigger branch, and so forth. In the same way, no desire simply lives by itself. Each one of your desires is attached to your whole tree of desires, with each one being preceded by a previous unfulfilled desire, with one before that and one before that. The latest desire to emerge, the new desire, comes because all the previous ones are still unfulfilled, all the way back to the first desire, the root desire. Every desire will find its beginning in infancy. As an example of one desire leading to many more, perhaps you want to have enough money to buy a house. After working hard and saving your money, one day you are ready to buy a house. Has your desire then been fulfilled? Not yet, because one desire leads to others. Now that you have your new house, your desire is to make it beautiful. So you desire more money to paint it, to replace the roof, to get a new stove and refrigerator in matching stylish colors. Has your desire been fulfilled? Not yet, because you still have more desires. Now that you have a house and it is beautiful, you now desire a new lawn to match. And now that your house and lawn are beautiful, you desire a fence with a gate to keep people from walking on your lawn, and a guard dog to keep the robbers away, as well as an insurance policy in case someone falls down on your walkway and sues you. You can see how it goes on, because desires branch out and lead to many others. Desires are fears. Fears are desires. As noted in chapter 1, desires are essentially the same as fears. When you desire something, you're also fearing something. If you say, "I want to be loved," it's the same thing as saying, "I'm afraid I won't be loved." If you say, "I want to have someone around me," it's the same as saying, "I'm afraid of being alone." If you say, "I want to be wealthy," where does the fear lie in that? It could be various things: fear of being poor, fear of not having any influence, fear of being pushed around, and so on. The fear behind wanting to be attractive is the fear of not being popular, not being accepted, of being shut out, or whatever it might be for you. If you say, "I want to live," it's the same as saying, I'm afraid of dying. Desires and fears are the same thing, simply formulated differently. Underlying them both is the fear of not surviving. Your fears of drowning, of falling out of an airplane, of being poisoned, of suffocating, of freezing, of not getting enough to eat are all just ways of saying that you are afraid of not surviving. Even if you move up a psychological step and say, I'm afraid of what people will say about me, you're afraid because you feel that your survival depends on them. I'm sure you've experienced something like this. You're invited to a party or are going on a business interview. You carefully decide what you are going to wear to make the right impression. You go to the cleaners to pick up your suit, but find that they put a big ink spot right in the middle of your jacket. You feel as if your world is about to collapse, and you freak out because subconsciously you have equated looking good with survival. If this spot on your jacket keeps you from looking good, then it keeps you from making the right impression, and that keeps them from liking you, and so on. Of course, this situation is not really a crisis. If we were in the now, we would realize that it simply means there is a spot on the jacket and nothing more. But because all our desires are ultimately tied up with our concern about survival, anything that goes wrong causes us to panic. The third important thing to remember is that each of your desires is really a concern about your survival. When you finally see that the desires and fears that you have today are actually the desires and fears of your 4-year-old, and that you're not weak and helpless after all, your survival is no longer such a big problem. In addition, most of your desires will just fade away by themselves. Needs versus desires. To understand this concept more clearly, we must understand the difference between a need and a desire. As referred to here, a need is something that is required to survive. It's not something you would simply like to have, as in, I need a new car. What we actually need for survival is oxygen, water, food, sleep, and the right temperature. Wanting these things is not the same as desiring them because they are life-sustaining needs. On the other hand, the things we desire are not needed to sustain our bodies. For example, you may want to buy a new coat. If you have no other coat and winter is coming, then you may actually need a new coat. However, if you already have 3 coats in your closet, your desire to get a new one is only because it's the latest fashion. You want to impress people by being presentable, attractive, and acceptable because you think people will then like you. And why do you want them to like you? So there will be someone to take care of you. You think you want a new coat, but your real desire is for someone to be there to take care of you because you feel that your survival depends on other people. That realization might surprise you, but if you trace back any desire, at its heart you will find the fear of not surviving. Desires cannot be fulfilled. You need to understand that your desires cannot be fulfilled. For example, in the case of the new winter coat, you may buy it and it might seem that your desire has been fulfilled. But since every desire is attached to an earlier, unfulfilled desire, buying the coat is not enough. After about a week, you will get used to your new coat, and then that energy will be focused on desiring something else. I need a new hat. I need some new boots to go with my new coat. You are still not complete. You are still not satisfied. You are still frustrated. Suppose you have a big kettle that holds water, and the only way you can see how much water it holds is by looking at a gauge on the side that tells you if it's full, half full, or empty. Imagine, however, that this gauge is broken, so when you put water in the kettle, the water level goes up and up, but the gauge always says empty. It's the same with desires. The program in your head still says, I need, I desire, I must have. But no matter how much you put in, no matter how many desires you fulfill, you always feel empty. You can buy a new coat or anything else you desire, but it will never bring you the lasting fulfillment you are really seeking, because that desire is not coming from the reality in the here and now. Rather, it's coming from a fantasy world, from the infant that you used to be. Once you see this dilemma, you will stop wasting your time. Neutralizing your desires. To truly satisfy or neutralize your desires, you have to do so in the realm in which the desires actually exist, the world of fantasy. For example, when you were a little girl of 4, you wanted your father's love. That wish was registered in your inner computer, and you continued to carry it around as you grew older. Later, you transferred the love you wanted from Daddy to a desire for all the men in your life to love you. You feel that if the man you are dating today loves you, then Daddy loves you. Unfortunately, this will never work because the desire to get Daddy's love is not coming from the present. It is coming from the world of memory, the world of fantasy. The only way to fulfill or neutralize deep-seated desires from your childhood is to actually imagine yourself getting what you wanted. The method that we call the trapdoor game, which consists of 5 steps, will enable you to go back to the time when the wish originally arose. The trapdoor game allows you to see that all your present desires have their source in the past, and that this past is just a bundle of memories. It's no longer actually happening now, and you can see that you no longer need to be influenced by it. Using your imagination, you then give yourself an abundance of whatever it is that you desired. Then the desire will be fulfilled and will finally disappear. You won't have to spend any more energy on it. When your desires are exposed for what they really are, they lose their power. Believe it or not, this works because the subconscious can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. It thinks that the desire has actually been fulfilled through the fantasy. You go through a series of steps backward, or what I called trapdoors, into your past. I call this the trapdoor game because it's like going into a room which is your present desire, knowing that there is a room beneath that room, a desire beneath your present desire. Through this game, you look for the trapdoor to take you down to the room hidden below. But this new room also has a room hidden below, so you look for the trapdoor to take you there, and on until you get to your original fear. This is a technique to clear up the emotions entangled in your desires. Without examining this, most of your energy will go into trying to get what you want or trying to be what you want to be. In following the red line of the emotions involved in a particular desire and then tracing that desire right back to birth, you can see that your present desire in reality comes from infancy and your primary worry about survival.